In this session, we're going to look at team culture and failure. Let's look back at the 5 dysfunctions of a team from Lencioni in 2002. We looked at this in lecture 1, but understanding the 5 dysfunctions of a team also give us an insight into team culture. At the very base of the pyramid, and there's a reason it's a pyramid, because if you don't have trust, then you can't build the other things. At the base of the pyramid of Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions is absence of trust. So he's telling us that a fundamental aspect of team functionality and team performance is trust. And this relates to the concepts we discussed in relation to coursework 1 to do with psychological safety. Because as human beings, we basically want to be invulnerable. So we don't want to expose our weaknesses, we don't want to expose our insecurities, and therefore we don't tend to be honest with each other and also with ourselves. And that's just a natural human trait. The result of that is it becomes impossible to build trust within the team because we're not being honest with each other or ourselves. So in many cases it's almost as though we're conditioned to keep our guards up. And that unfortunately is compounded by the fact that we are more likely to do that when we're in a situation of forming a new team or joining a new team. Because remember, when we're talking about teams, it's natural to consider a team forming like you would in a group work at university or a more controlled environment where nobody belonged to the group or the team to begin with, and then the team was formed. But the reality in many organizational teams is that the team existed already and you are joining it as a new member of the team. We also live in a society where the idea of weakness and exposing weaknesses is frowned upon, and all of these elements combine to make the potential for building trust within a team a steep challenge even at the very beginning. How does a team go about building trust at the initial stages? And that is both for examples of teams starting from scratch and indeed when teams change, when new members join or when members leave. How do we go about building trust? There are a lot of exercises that you'll actually be familiar with, and you are likely to have gone through them yourselves in different settings already in your grown-up lives in particular. Personal histories exercises are often used at an early stage of team building because it's a non-controversial way of getting to know other members of your team, where they come from, what they're about. And you may have done that kind of thing in icebreakers, as they're called, in, say, for example, tutorial sessions at university or when you've joined clubs and societies. And certainly if you've worked during your time at university, there may have been these sorts of informal onboarding exercises to try to build a sense of trust and understanding among team members. In organizations, very often they look at team effectiveness exercises. So they're looking at going through challenges as a team and looking at what elements of the contributions made by the different members were important to the outcome of the challenge. So they're identifying, let's call it, capabilities within the team. But then in the same process, what they're also doing when they're looking at team effectiveness is trying to be open about what approaches either must be changed or indeed eliminated for the good of the team's performance in the future. So it's a bit, you could call it role play, but what they are doing is simulating moments where the team is challenged in the future and trying to identify in a neutral way, in an environment which is safe, trying to identify points of approach or process or even people's personality styles that need to be changed or eliminated for the good of the effectiveness of the team in the future. Big organizations also go often through personality behavioral preference profiling procedures. You may have heard of the Briggs-Meyer psychological testing, basically putting you in a box, the kind of personality you have. These are quite blunt instruments, but they serve to give at least a comparative basis of understanding of the different types of people who belong to an organization, and therefore maybe form more effective teams depending on their personality types. So they're going through the basic process of understanding who are we, why do we do what we do. So that brings into it motivations, and motivations will be discussed in the course at a later date. But just getting that sense of the personalities that form the team. That process only works if there's 360-degree feedback, i.e. 360-degree feedback means that feedback is flowing in both directions along a hierarchy, if there is a hierarchy, and there often will be some degree of hierarchy in any organizational structure. So people feel empowered to offer feedback and voice concerns up the chain, as well as feedback being delivered down the chain. And I mentioned role play. Often an early means of establishing trust is to put the team into an experiential environment and just let them get on with it. And that's where you will have heard of team building days, and that's why they're called team building days. Is at the basis there's an effort to establish trust, and by putting the team in a different environment and challenging them, they learn more about their effectiveness and the way they organize as a team, and it gives them a chance to reflect on how that might be translated for their actual performance in the real world. So these processes are used regularly and are important, and the idea of experiential team exercises will be something that you handle in the development of your second piece of coursework.